Welcome everyone to the Bran'sCorner podcast. We're so glad to have you here today. This episode is found in both audio and video form. As per usual, you can find the audio episode anywhere you can find podcasts. But to check out the video, go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Tansen Talks. This episode will begin in just one moment after these sponsored messages, so please stay tuned. Are you someone that's into video or audio editing? Perhaps you just simply want to transcribe your content. Well, look no further than Descript. Descript allows for you to transcribe and edit your podcast as simple as it can be. In fact, they've recently expanded to now include all types of video projects. To find out more about Descript, go ahead and check out their website and learn more. An affiliate link will be posted at the end of this episode and in the description. Thank you so much, and let's get into today's episode. Hello everyone, this is Brandon K. Hedgepeth, lifelong learner, communicator, and your friend, and I'm glad to be here back with new episodes of the Bran'sCorner podcast, and so I'm really excited to share this interview with you all. And so let me go ahead and start off by introducing today's guest. And so my guest here today is a senior at the University of Colorado Boulder, and she is majoring in Aerospace Engineering, and I'm just extremely excited to have her on. Please welcome my guest today, Hannah. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, happy to be here.
Well, I'm happy to have you here. And so first of all, how are you doing today?
I am doing well. It's a nice Saturday. It's a bit cooler in Colorado, but I don't mind. How are you?
I'm doing quite well. Like I said, I've been excited about this for quite a little bit, and it's been a great day so far, and so I can't wait for us to go ahead and get into this. Yeah, and so before we go ahead and start this off, though, I did want to give a moment for you to go ahead and introduce yourself for the watching or listening audience.
All right. As Brandon said, my name's Hannah. I am from Colorado, born and raised, and I'm currently going to the University of Colorado Boulder for my bachelor's in Aerospace Engineering. In case you're wondering how we know each other, I actually had an internship with Virginia Space this summer, and that's where I met Brandon.
Yeah, and that was such a great internship, and I'm really excited to have you here since we didn't really have a chance to really get to know each other over this past summer, so I'm glad to have that opportunity now.
Me too.
Yeah, and so I guess to really start off, first of all, what really brought you into the light of engineering, and like what was the initial foundations of that?
As a kid, I was in this is a terrible name, by the way. It's called the Gifted Talented program, GT. Very bad naming. It puts a lot of pressure on kids. Or like, oh, if you don't do well in school, you're no longer gifted, you're talented. I digress. I was in that since like first grade, and part of it, you get different labels to describe the kind of learner that you are or what areas you excel in. For me, that was quantitative. So basically, I was good at math. Throughout elementary school, middle school, and high school, I really excelled in math. And so one of the obvious career paths for me was to become an engineer. And I thought it'd be a good way to use something that I'm good at and to do something really interesting with my life.
That's actually really interesting how, yeah, I mean, that started off. And so for me in elementary school, I was in, for 1 year only, I was in our talented and gifted program. For us, we called it TAG. And so I really loved my time in that program. But I find it interesting that for you that they went even further and essentially found where your interest, I guess, best fits, so to speak. And I know right before we started recording, you were mentioning that you've essentially grown up and lived most of your life in Colorado.
Oh, yeah. I thought it was really useful to know, like, oh, here's where you excel at, especially at a younger age, like fourth grade, just to understand, like, oh, this is what I can really be good at. It's not like limiting, I would say. It's just a nice thing to know.
And so, well, actually, you partially just answered that, but but I'll still ask it anyway, just in case. And so for you, did it feel like, since you were already like told about that like early on, do you think that like may have helped turn you off of certain things or guide you towards other areas, or was that simply just a you just knew it in the back of your mind, but it didn't really affect your, I guess, day to day life? I'm just curious about that, since like we said, that is such an early age to to already be thinking about that.
I think it was more in the back of the mind because, like, when you're a kid, you're like, I can do anything. I was really into writing poetry, and I was like, I could become an author or other things like that. But as I got older, it helped me, especially like in high school, where I was like, you know what? One of the things I really like to do is I'm very into art, but that's not the most stable source of income. And so it was nice to be like, oh, yeah, that's right. I am good at math. So, that could lead to a very nice career. Also, I'm sorry if you hear anything in the background. Um, there are some dogs here, so just ignore barking if you hear it.
Well, that is good to know. And as of right now, I don't hear any, but we'll see as we get further along through our interview. But I think that's actually really great that you were able to at least know some things that you're good at. Because I know a lot of times, especially throughout the duration of school, you find out what you are interested in, what you aren't interested in. But sometimes too, it just almost comes to thought of what actually am I good at. And so, how did they really determine that? Was it just like a test, or did they like study you all for the first several years leading up to then?
To be honest, I'm not entirely sure. I think it's mostly based off of like they watched us like throughout the years and saw what areas we excelled in. And then there's also standardized testing so they could see like, oh, like in terms of the US, like this is where you rank kind of a thing. And it helped them combined with like the teacher's input, like this is what they do in class to say like this is the type of learner they are and this is where they excel.
Well, that makes perfect sense. And so leaving out of of elementary school, like, I guess, how did your mind for engineering really progress over the years, and and I guess, when did it really, I guess, truly hit you?
I think middle school, for some reason in middle school, I was like, I want to go to Harvard or Yale because those are prestigious schools. And then someone was like, do you want to be a lawyer? I was like, no. Then they're like, why are you going to Harvard or Yale? And I was like, you got a good point there. You got a really good point there. Um, I definitely want to do something with math. For a while, I was thinking about architecture since it's a good marriage of math and art in terms of like drawing, design. But engineering just sounded cooler. And also, it does help that it makes more money, and I appreciate financial stability, especially being the oldest with two elderly parents. I've always felt the need to be financially stable in order to support my parents and my younger sister. So, engineering it was, and when you look through the different majors and stuff like that, I was like, aerospace engineering definitely sounds the coolest. And you think about all the Apollo missions and how inspiring that was to go to the moon and like do things you've never before seen. And I just want to be a part of that.
Well, that's pretty cool, and especially with many of those missions, a lot of them, of course, very historic in nature as well, and really helping to define where we are now. Really, if you think about it, so many things started because of the space race. And I mean, even computers and the internet, as we know it, actually started because of then. And so, I mean, it really comes to mind where it's just like, wow, it's like all of this is truly because of our exploration of what's unknown. And so, so for you, I mean, it's interesting to hear how you said that. Yeah, it truly was a trying to see of what you're good at, where your interests lie, and and really just trying to see, okay, well, around the corner, I'll have to pay for things, which what needs, I mean, what truly can, I guess, help you afford a comfortable life. And also, I like that you said that you also looking towards the future too, definitely helping to take care of your family as well.
Oh yeah, it's something I've always been aware of because I was adopted. I was adopted when my parents were like in their late 40s. As a kid, I was always like well aware that everyone's parents were much younger than mine. Um, Not really an issue, but as I got older, it's kind of like, oh man, I have to really think ahead because most people might be like in their late 20s or something. I have to worry about like their parents' care and stuff like that. But I've been kind of prepped since a young age, and again, being the oldest, a lot of responsibility falls on me.
Yeah, I bet. And so I'm glad first of all that you are. I mean that you of course started off looking ahead and that you're already very conscious of that, but then also looking out for your younger siblings as well.
Hmm.
And so, out of curiosity, are they around the same age as you or significantly younger?
I have one sister, and she is younger by 3 years. So we are currently both in college right now, which is quite the whammy for the parents in terms of finances.
Oh, I bet. And but I mean, at least that with both of you in college, are you all at different colleges or?
Yeah. She went to Colorado State University, which sounds like the University of Colorado, but they're different.
Well, at least you all stayed. I mean, stayed local enough of within the state lines anyway.
Hmm.
And so even though I'm jumping ahead a little, do you plan on continuing to stay in Colorado after you finish college since you are in your senior year?
I am honestly not sure. Colorado is very nice, especially for my degree, because it's basically the Silicon Valley of like aerospace engineering currently. There's tons of different companies here and opportunities. So a good part of me is like, why leave when I've grown up here? I'm comfortable. I love it here. And if there's opportunities here, but I'm also open to exploring other opportunities like in Virginia, even like internationally. It's just kind of like, let's just see where it goes. I'll have to wait and get back to you on that.
Well, definitely keep me posted on that. And so, continuing on though, so when you were leaving high school, so were you set at that point as to at least some form of engineering in terms of where you wanted to get into?
Oh yeah, I was just like, you know what? I'm gonna pick aerospace engineering and I'm gonna stick with it. And I mean, it's worked so far. So
And was Colorado Boulder your first choice, or were you trying to still explore around from day one?
I was definitely thinking Colorado Boulder because, again, as one of the best aerospace programs in the country, it's very close. It's a beautiful campus. I was pretty familiar with it because I've toured it several times, like as a kid and later on in high school. So it was a pretty like shoe-in. I had some backups like UNC, University of Northern Colorado. I was also considering going to the Colorado School of Mines, which is like just an engineering school. Um, but for like various reasons, CU Boulder was the obvious best choice for me.
Well, I'm glad that worked out for you. And now, especially in your senior year, I mean, so how has the college experience been for you and really getting, diving straight into aerospace engineering?
It's been kind of crazy. Especially since my freshman year, 2019, like the end of it was, COVID, so that was kind of crazy. But as I'm sure all your listeners know, everyone has been through that. It was all kind of crazy then. But in terms of college itself, I was really lucky. My freshman year, I was able to get a mentor who was a graduate student in aerospace, and so I was introduced to a lab on campus, material structures. So that was super cool. Um, I've just had like a lot of opportunities and I've tried to take as many as possible. And so like those are the big things that I began working in the lab. So I would test like different materials like astral quartz and stuff like that to see the strain and stress under different conditions and write papers for that. So I had a pretty lucky experience in terms of like getting getting a lot of applicable experience to my major early on. Then I was later actually a part of the Ball Sisters program. So Ball as in Ball Aerospace. They also make cups. I didn't know this. I just knew them from aerospace, but like their biggest thing is like cups and glasses and stuff like that. But anyways, that was a big thing. My mentor was Sissy Ogle, wonderful, wonderful woman. She's worked on tons of really cool projects like Maven and Juno. But that was another huge opportunity for me in college. I'm gonna try and do it again this year if I can. And then I've of course had my internships.
Wow, that is pretty cool. And yeah, what's interesting is a lot of people like really aren't aware about Ball and doing aerospace stuff. So I find it interesting that you only knew the opposite of.
Yeah.
So that's actually pretty cool, and so I'm glad that you were able to get those experiences, and certainly, of course, with your first year ending, of course, with the advent of the COVID-19 experience, I'm sure that definitely changed up the dynamic of things for you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, for me, I was actually that was my first semester of full time college was
Mm.
spring 2020, and so I remember it actually when the campus closed. It was at I think if I remember correctly, it was actually at the exact halfway point of the semester. Like I counted out the actual days. I mean, I had a lot of free time, and so I counted out the actual days. It truly was at the exact halfway point, and so for me, I'm a virtual student, and so that first half was the only time I've ever been a full time student on a college campus. But I
Mm.
digress. But at least you were able to have a little bit of a foundation on campus, before everything closed down. And so for you, how was it actually when you made the initial transition into, I presume that your university also transitioned into online learning during those times like many did in the United States?
Yeah, it was rough. um I know a lot of people share like a similar experience, but for me it was a lot harder to take online classes. Something about it not being in person made it a lot more difficult for me to concentrate, and it's a lot easier for me to slack off. I made it through, luckily, but it was definitely hard, and you definitely miss more of that like face-to-face interaction, and just the ability to physically be on campus is really nice, and to get like the full college experience.
Yeah, definitely. And so, especially for, I mean, for engineering too, which is for the most part tends to be very hands-on and not being
Hmm.
able to actually put your hands on things. I mean, that certainly is not quite the same experience.
Oh yeah, especially for labs and stuff like that. Oof, I was very glad when we were able to go back in person for those laboratories.
Oh yeah, definitely. All right, and so yeah, but I'm glad to hear that you were able to get back into the physical classroom where you feel most comfortable with. And so, were you able to go back as soon as the upcoming fall, or was it a little bit longer for you?
If I'm honest, I'm trying to think back because all the COVID years kind of meshed together. Um, yeah, this was the first time in a while that like everything's been like fully in person. I think last spring it was a bit mixed, like it depended. Sometimes it was like partially in person, partially online, still trying to get fully like integrated.
Yeah, I know. Like it's been such an interesting time, and I mean, even now, I mean, at least we're definitely a lot further along, and at the close enough anyway of the forward going forward. Not trying to say the word forward twice, but I guess that's what I'm going with. But yeah, so at least, like I said, we're able to now be in a more comfortable position with that, and so for you, of course, now in senior year, you mentioned too that you've been able to have a bit of different laboratory experiences as well as internships. And so, how has that helped you on like truly applying what you've been learning throughout your time in college?
Labs are amazing as much. grief as they can give me. Applying learning always makes it so much better in terms of recall and as well as just the overall feeling that what you're doing is worth something by being able to apply it. I know one of my labs is actually really cool is using MATLAB, which in case your listeners don't know is it's a language, like a coding language used mostly for graphing and other data analytics. But we used MATLAB to model what it'd be like to stop a spinning satellite using angular momentum by releasing weights on the end of strings. Sounds very oddly specific, and it was. But I thought it was a really good experience, and all those labs helped prepare me for my several internships and came very much in handy.
Wow. Well, I'm glad that you were able to get that experience. And so I'm sure you're also pretty familiar, which I think you actually just mentioned, come to think of it, the programming side of that too. And so for you, were you familiar at all with, I mean, any of the programming languages prior to these experiences?
Prior to college, I had no programming experience, so it was all very new. I know C, C++, and MATLAB, but again, like all of it was new to me the second I got into college, so I really had to practice. And at least at CU Boulder, MATLAB is a huge part of the aerospace curriculum.
Well, I'm glad that you were able to, I mean, to get that experiences, then especially with it being well integrated, because I know it played a big role within your later experiences as well.
Oh yeah. Um, for the listeners, when I worked with Brandon at Virginia Space, like, oh, I had no idea. They ended up being like, hey, you can choose what project you worked on, and there's a lot of jargon, obviously, especially since I've never worked on a launch pad before, and took it and ran with it.
Well, I mean, I'm truly glad that you were, I mean, that you were able to, like you said, take it and run with it. And overall, did you enjoy your experience this summer?
Oh, very much so. It's a very rare experience where you get to intern for an aerospace company, but especially one on the coast who works so closely with NASA, who owns like one of the two launch pads that have been used to refuel the ISS. Like that's super cool, of course. Amazing opportunity. I'm very glad I took it, and I'm very happy I took the project that I did because it gave me a lot of freedom to create my own code and really show what I can do.
Well, like I said, I'm just so glad that, I mean, it all worked out and was able to also be a learning experience too, to try to, I mean, to really like dive further into, I mean, truly like how you want to apply your learning going forward, especially with being so close to graduation. And so now in your senior year, what are some of the initiatives that you are working on and in preparation for the official graduation?
Ooh, fantastic question. Mostly just trying to get my degree done. I also decided to get a degree, or a minor, I should say, in astronomy since I've taken a lot of astronomy courses. It's not too much when adding to my current curriculum. I'm a senior this year, but because of a series of mistakes on my own part, I won't be graduating until until an extra year. So like technically this is my senior year, but I'm going to be a super senior if that all makes sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. But hey, it gives you more time to definitely like evaluate everything and truly make sure that, yeah, that you truly know where you want to head following graduation. And actually, I think I've heard from almost all of the engineering people that I know, yeah, saying that they have programs that go for 5 years instead of the traditional four. So it's, I'm not sure if that's, yeah, I think I've actually asked the question, and some people told me that that's how programs are designed. Other people said that's just pure coincidence. I just know that many people in engineering, but whatever the case may be, I I just know so many people, but I digress. But I'm really glad that you are enjoying it, and so working to, I guess, finish out this year, though, what are some of the things that you've learned throughout your college experience, internships, labs, and all of the above that I guess really help define where you are now? And even if it's, prior to then or completely unrelated.
I think I learned a lot through my internships. Like they taught me like exponentially more than school did, just because it's very different being in the classroom versus like actively working on different projects. Like at my time at Tendeg, which is in Colorado, I ended up working on a couple of NASA subcontracts, one of them being the Star Shade, which is a giant origami kind of structure that would be used to deploy in space and help block out the light of stars to make it easier to scan for exoplanets. And so that entire experience, it was only a summer. Actually, no, it was a summer and then plus the next school year, I worked part time. It was fantastic. Learned new things about what it's like working with actual customers, working with NASA, the kind of stuff that you can expect to have to do in terms of like preparing to show like this is what we think is going to be the next best step. Um, Learning how to fabricate and make different demos and designs. I learned how to use CAD, which was very useful. Overall, like I just found it extremely important to the development of my aerospace career.
Well, that's great to hear that. I mean, that these developments were truly allowed, I mean, able to help you go forward and fully understand a little bit more as to, I mean, truly what the future holds for you. And so overall, what are some of, I guess, what are some of the things that you're really excited to do towards the future, whether it's, the immediate future or even the far out future from now?
I'm just very excited to keep working on space stuff. It's cool to be like a little part of history and to say like, "Oh, I worked on that." I know, especially now since the Artemis missions are beginning, it's just super cool to be like, "Well, this is our like Apollo basically," and to be able to have the opportunity to work on that in the future. In fact, I tried to watch the launch of Artemis 1 like the last month, but obviously, in case you didn't know, it got scrapped a couple times due to like different issues. But I'm still very much excited, and I feel like almost every single aerospace engineer's like goal is this. But eventually, I would like, if I could, to work for NASA in some sort of capacity.
Oh yeah, I definitely fully understand that, and I think who wouldn't want to work for NASA, whether it's a full time part or contractor, short term, long term. I mean, even I don't even think it's even just the just to say. I mean, just like for the resume experience. I mean, but who else can really say, I've done stuff for NASA. I've been on a NASA base and all this other stuff. And I mean, even all the stuff you've done now, even is just so impressive. And I mean, so definitely right there. I mean, it's just like you said, a part of history. And there's so much we're learning about space right now. And I mean, we have a whole international space station. I mean, I know that's just common knowledge to us, and it's just stuff we're used to. But even 50 years ago, I mean, who would have dreamed that that would just be a normal thing to say? It's just like, oh yeah, up there's the International Space Station.
Oh yeah, it's just crazy. It's very very cool. I know my parents are very very impressed, and they like to brag about me. But it's just cool. Space is so cool. No offense, like aircraft dynamics, like that stuff is very useful, very valid. I just think space is cooler. More stuff, more new horizons, so to speak.
Well, that is certainly, I think a very fair argument right there. And of course, I mean, everything has its definite relevance and use, but yeah, there's just something about, I mean, the exploration of space, though, there's just, I mean, really appealing, especially like being able to see all the possibilities unlocked with it. And out of curiosity, since I have you on, what are some of your thoughts about the James Webb Telescope that is out there now taking pictures of truly, I mean, taking pictures of like so much of space, but not just space and the way that we see it, but because of course, the way light travels. I mean, truly the history of space. I mean, what are some of your thoughts? I'm just really curious.
Oh, it is so cool. Like already, as any kind of nerd, I was super impressed with Hubble's images because it's like, oh hell yeah, really cool looking galaxies. But James Webb is like so far above in terms of like complexity and ability when it comes to comparing it to Hubble that it's super cool to see all these new images from James Webb and to like see how many avenues that opens up for us for research into the history of the universe. It's also just such a crazy thing to think like again we're like looking back in time essentially because the way light travels. I always thought that was super cool.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just so impressed by it. I mean, even for me as a communication person, I mean, I just love, I mean, that we're able to get this far, and it really makes me think about, I mean, if we're already here being able to do this in 2022, well, what are the amazing things we're going to be able to see like throughout our lifetime? I mean, we're already past so many of the expectations that people had. I mean, even 10 years ago. So to see where we will be 10 years from now in 2032, wow. What's scary is how soon that is to now, honestly. But I mean, but even to think about where we'll be then, I mean, it will get here sooner than we think.
I know it's crazy. Time marches on. When you're a kid, you're like, "What do you mean time goes fast? It's taking forever." But now, the older you get, you're like, "Oh man, I guess I'm an adult now. I guess you know we're really just going through this."
Yeah, definitely. And so, what are some of your hopes and aspirations to see over the this next decade from science and even the world overall? Like, what direction do you hope that we're heading into?
I think it would be very nice to get like a resurgence of the government support of NASA. I mean, it's not going to be as likely as strong as it was during the 60s just because of the Cold War, and so that was like a huge factor. But I do look back and kind of wish that like we had the same kind of STEM support that we did in the 60s. There's still a lot of STEM support, to be fair, but I would very much like more exploration. I'm very excited for the idea of Artemis and the idea of putting a gateway. So it's kind of like the ISS, but for the moon, so to speak, for lunar missions. That's super exciting to me. Um, the world's kind of crazy. I don't know what I really hope for other than relative peace and safety. I mean, I've been pretty privileged my entire life living in the US, especially since we might have been like at war technically, like Afghanistan and Iran, but it's never truly affected the citizens. I would just hope for this is so cheesy. Continued relative peace, especially it's a very interesting time with COVID and again like with the recent death of the Queen, what this means for like long-standing institutions like the monarchy. I'm not super educated about these specific areas, so I don't want to like get on my soapbox necessarily, but I feel like in general, I just hope everything's okay.
Yeah, and this truly is I mean, a game changing time that we're in right now. Like you said, between the COVID-19 pandemic, the explorations into space, the recent passing of Queen Elizabeth II, and I mean, so much more stuff. I mean, that has happened. I mean, even in this year alone, and so I never really know, especially now, like what the future holds. But like you said, I mean, we just hope that everyone's able to maintain their health and safety, and that we're able to, even through the challenges, that we're able to still find a way to pivot through them and just, keep building a better life. Hopefully, one better than previous generations. We try our best anyway.
Yeah.
But overall, I've just so enjoyed speaking with you. But I did actually want to allow time for you. Is there anything else that you wanted to say while you're here speaking with us? And like I said, I've just so enjoyed thus far being able to hear from you and all of your journey. And so, yeah, the floor is all yours.
I think one thing, I'll just explain briefly how I got to Virginia this past summer. It's kind of like, you're from Colorado. How did you end up on like the very, very East Coast? For people who don't know, there is an annual space symposium held in Colorado Springs at the Broadmoor. It is the biggest space conference nationally and internationally. And so my Ball Aerospace mentor actually had a great suggestion for me to go volunteer there. Because I was able to volunteer, if you volunteer a certain amount of hours, you're allowed to get different day passes to go and mingle and check out all the different, I'm forgetting the word. It's kind of like setups, like different tables at a conference. I'm blanking. Either way, like you could go and see the floor and see the different presentations from different companies, and then also go to different speeches or talks. And so I ended up doing that. It was a fantastic time. It's much better than paying like $800 for a ticket. It's a very, very exclusive event. And so that's where I was able to walk around and get in touch with someone from Virginia Space. And from there, I was able to, keep up contact, apply for their internship, and eventually interview and then get it. So, yeah, I talked about my internship at Tendeg, my internship at Virginia Space, as we've talked about, dealt with a lot of MATLAB. I had a lot of freedom in terms of updating their current code to more modern standards in terms of data analysis and user friendliness. So that was very fun, and I'm actually continuing to work on that. This time, though, from Colorado.
Well, first of all, definitely good job on that. And I really can't wait to see what you do. I mean, both now and in the future to come. I mean, this all just sounds just so exciting.
Oh, yeah, I am also very excited.
Well, that's great to hear. And so, one of the things that I like doing on the podcast, while I'm speaking with guests before we close out each episode throughout this year, is to allow the guests to be able to say some parting words to help encourage or inspire the next generation of people who are listening here to the podcast. And so what are some, whether it is a inspirational quote or just some closing thoughts or whatever the case may be, I did want to turn the floor over to you to go ahead and close out today's episode.
All right. I would say don't put yourself in a hole. I know for me, aerospace engineering seemed like, okay, this is like a kind of lofty goal. We'll just try and like go step by step and see if we can get to it. But as long as you try and you work hard towards big goals, there's a good chance that you'll be able to make it. Not only that, but don't be afraid of failure. I was like an international baccalaureate student, like straight A's, did fantastic in school. College was still rough. College was still hard. I still failed a class or two, and that's okay. That's what happens, and you can't let that get you down. You just have to keep going. Take all the opportunities you can, step by step, to the career that you want.
Well, that is really great to hear. Thank you so much, Hannah, for coming out here and speaking with us all the way from Colorado. And even though that there's not really any commute or anything because this is virtual, still nevertheless, thank you so much for taking this time and for truly giving us some insight into your career and journey. And I wish you all the best. And of course, you're always welcome here on the podcast.
All right. Thanks again for having me, Brandon.
Great, of course, and have a great rest of your day. For those of you listening or watching, thank you all so much for tuning in. I always appreciate your support, and I'll catch you all later. Have a wonderful day, everyone, and I'll see y'all next time. Take care. Thank you so much to Descript for sponsoring the Bran'sCorner podcast. Find out more about them in the description of this podcast. As always, thank you so much for tuning in to the podcast. We so greatly appreciate it. The Bran'sCorner podcast has been created and produced by Hedgepeth, Hedgepeth LLC.